And we are live. Welcome to CryptoLaw TV. I'm John Deaton, the founder and your host. Listen, today's show is all about one thing. I believe, I even said this during the Ripple litigation, as important as that, is that the banking situation in America and what's happening and Chokepoint 2.0 has been probably the most important, significant litigation and issue facing the crypto industry. I mean, just think about it. If you don't have on and off rails, things like that, then they can choke this entire industry, and that's what's happened. And also, CryptoLaw has started a new project. We're actually going to have a separate page dedicated solely to Chokepoint 2.0. Here's a screenshot of it. We're going live, sort of what we did in the Ripple litigation and the Coinbase litigation and all the regulation by enforcement. We're turning our attention, organizing, and trying to bring attention to this important issue. Because understand, Chokepoint 2.0, as I've posted out there, it's much bigger than crypto, digital assets, banking charters. It is essential to what America stands for. Are we a society that's governed by the rule of law, or are we going to allow unelected bureaucrats to have the discretion to decide the winners and the losers? Are we going to have a free market capitalist society where it's a level playing field and innovation is fostered and facilitated? Or are we just going to have, this old boy network where these unelected bureaucrats like Gary Gensler, Martin Gruenberg get to sit back and decide who wins in America and who loses? And listen, I couldn't talk about this topic. I'm hoping my second guest joins me, but two of the leading people are Caitlyn Long and Nick Carter. Let's bring on Caitlyn. Everyone knows her. She's been on CryptoLaw. I've called her a fellow warrior. Even during the Ripple litigation, as important as that was, I said to everybody out there, pay attention to this fight with Custodial Bank. It is the single most important issue facing the crypto industry. Caitlyn, welcome. Happy New Year.
Hey, thanks, John. Happy New Year to you. I said the same thing about your Ripple litigation. I think a lot of folks in the crypto space were thinking that was a Ripple thing, and it wasn't until you and I did a podcast, and then I think I did a Peter McCormick podcast about your book, and said, look, what you achieved in that case, didn't you end up getting something like 60,000 people to agree to be sued? 75,000 people to agree to be sued by the SEC, by the U.S. government, to agree to become defendants against the U.S. government. I don't know why more people aren't talking about that as an achievement in the legal community, John. And so congrats on your new website. Are you intending to do something similar with Operation Chokepoint? Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, listen, I'm going to be involved in any way. I've publicly, I was a former federal prosecutor. I was a special assistant United States attorney. Listen, if they're worried about qualifications, I was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal for my work as a federal prosecutor. So I volunteered. I said, hey, appoint me, give me subpoena power. I'll do it for free. Because I'm not engaging, as you know, I'm preaching to the choir, but it's not hyperbole when I say that this is an attack on our foundation of our economic system and what America stands for and our system. And so, listen, they control the money, they control everything. And just to remind people real quick, Custodial Bank, what was your vision and why you started it?
Well, we were trying to solve the problem you were alluding to, which is the lack of durable banking services, and trying to do it in a way that fit within the existing regulatory system. Don't have to reinvent the wheel here, because the states have always had the ability to charter banks in the United States. And so Wyoming, as you know, Wyoming did a lot of, has enacted more than 40 different blockchain laws over 6 or 7 legislative sessions now. But one of the first ones was the Special Purpose Depository Institution, which was designed to deal with the Marty Gruenberg problem at the FDIC, which is that Marty Gruenberg was not going to allow a bank that was touching this industry to become FDIC insured. And we knew that. And it was actually the Wyoming regulator who at the time said, hey, you can create an uninsured bank charter. There are other states that have them. They're not new. And that's what Wyoming did, and other states have followed since. So what we were trying to do was, because we were looking at the structure, how does the industry, create a bank that's not going to abandon it, and be able to provide durable banking services. And John, I'm sorry to say, the Fed, because of its unlawful blocking of us, has prevented us from solving that problem. Meanwhile, both the Fed and the FDIC, and to a lesser extent the OCC, the trifecta, the three federal banking agencies, were very clearly executing Operation Chokepoint 2.0. And I know of a lot of evidence that has not come public yet. It's coming, and it will come public. Anyone who's still a skeptic about this, of which really it's really just the Warrenite far left who's questioning it at this point. I'm seeing a lot of Democrats. Tonya Evans, Dean Evans of Penn State Law School, just 2 days ago, she's a crypto for Harris person, and she came out and said, look, this Operation Chokepoint thing is real, and put a very, very good summary of the issue in Forbes. I highly recommend that you read it. So it's interesting that the divide is on the far left side of the Democratic Party. The moderate Democrats have accepted this and said, we've got to fix it.
Well, and there's another thing that we just learned, Caitlyn, which is that when we see these skeptics, yeah, there could be the far left division, but we've learned that there may be paid people by the FDIC from whistleblowers who came, Custodio is mentioned. There's no doubt you're mentioned. I know that Nick Carter was highlighted, that these people were making fun that we couldn't organize and that we wouldn't be able to hold them accountable. So when you say Chokepoint 2.0 is real, and there's people out there pushing back, I'm not saying it's true, but there's an allegation of a whistleblower saying they have paid people to fight back and engage in a misinformation or disinformation campaign to try to lessen the legitimacy of the Caitlyn Longs and the custodial banks, the Nick Carters, and everybody out there exposing it.
Yeah, well, in our space, no one questions it, right? And again, I've seen evidence. I've had multiple insiders come forward to me, in addition to the lawsuit discovery that Custodia had against the Fed. And I read every page of discovery on that. So I can't talk about it because a lot of that is behind the protective order. But there was plenty that was publicly revealed that indicated coordination between the agencies, as well as who at the agencies was involved in all this. And then more has come out from insiders. It's funny that DC is such a sieve, because multiple insiders have come forward. And frankly, it tells me there are really good people at these three banking agencies who are appalled by what the people at the top, particularly the political appointees, but also the senior career staff, has done here. And it's going to be fascinating, because I am 100% comfortable that all the FDIC issues are going to come out. 100% comfortable.
That's great news.
Yeah, listen, but I don't know about the Fed and OCC. They're going to fight. Yeah.
No, there's no doubt. And listen, so everybody understands, it's not just America, because many of jurisdictions work in connection with the policy being established in America. Real quick, I'm involved in Spin the Bits, which, starts in Canada. Spin the Bits can't get a bank account in Canada. Why? Because Spin the Bits is spend your Bitcoin. It uses, whether it's the XRP Ledger or Flare, it uses those technologies as a layer 2 solution to, sort of like Lightning, to spend your Bitcoin. But as soon as they learn that you're involved in crypto, nope, been denied.
Yeah.
Jay, the founder's been denied bank account after bank account.
All the time. I mean, we saw it a lot. Custodia is no longer operating our online banking because Custodia itself was debanked so many times. And what we discovered is we couldn't solve that problem for our customers, because our customers knew that Custodia had that problem too. And we just kept at it. And when you lose multiple mission critical tech integrations, a lot of folks just think, oh, just go get a new bank account. First of all, that's not easy. Second of all, the tech integrations that we had to build for each of these new banks when we brought them on were months and millions in the making each time, right? And so you lose multiple of those in the span of less than 2 years. It's crushing. And I think it was designed. It's pretty clear Custodia was targeted. You very clearly alluded to what the FDIC whistleblowers have said, and they have privately talked to me as well. I don't know who they are. I at this point, I'm careful to say, that they are allegations, but boy, there are very specific allegations, and they're naming names in the things that they're putting out. And I'm referring to a couple of Twitter accounts, one of which is FDIC Exposed.
Yeah, we can post that up just so people give credit to people out there. That I would encourage everyone to follow them, along with Caitlyn, along with CryptoLaw, Nick Carter. But these whistleblowers have come forward, and it's shocking.
And confirmed that Custodia was one of the companies targeted. And that's not a shock, John, to us. It is shocking to people who think that that the agencies are not doing extrajudicial things like that. You'd think the agencies are, doing their job, safety and soundness of the banking system up the middle of the fairway. No, there's a lot of skullduggery. We've lived it. And I have less experience with the OCC, but the FDIC and the Fed very clearly were targeting Custodia, and we're targeting this industry. And just wait till it all comes out. It's going to be very, very clear to even the skeptics. But like you said, the skeptics at this point, because the FDIC Exposed whistleblowers are telling us that the FDIC is working with friendly social media accounts and trying to suppress and censor the critics through working with the social media companies. I think a lot's going to come out on all that front too. And so you can't trust the critics because of the allegation that the critics are friendlies, if you will, that were placed by the FDIC to try to discredit those of us who are criticizing. But at this point, I think it's too late for the PR people to criticize folks like you, like Nick, there he is, Nick.
Right on time. You talk about perfect timing.
Sorry, I'm late. I'm late.
Good. We're just talking about.
I was having a huge crisis over here.
Oh no, everything's okay. We're just talking about the FDIC naming you and me and trying to discredit us, and I'm saying it's too late.
I just want the audience to know the conspiracy theorist himself, Nick Carter, has joined the program.
I'm here.
Hope everything's okay, Nick. Good to see you.
It's a plumbing related issue, but we're good now.
Those are the worst.
It's under control.
Well, listen, I mean, Custodial Bank was highlighted in these whistleblowers, and Nick, you were targeted by these unelected bureaucrats sitting back trying to make jokes at your expense. You were very cool about it, the way you posted it. And dealt with it, but
they think you're poor, Nick. That's what John's referring to.
I find it very funny. I do also want to get the documents themselves, though. I mean, it's still allegation territory. So
I think it's coming. It's coming. I don't know if you talked to the whistleblowers, and I have. They claim to have hundreds of hours of recordings.
I need the evidence, man.
Yep.
Where are the recordings?
Agreed.
Nick, if I'm not mistaken, did you coin Chokepoint 2.0? Were you the first one to sort of coin it? That's my recollection, but I don't want to misspeak.
Probably, yeah, I think so. I think the first time someone said it was my my March or February 2023 article.
Right,
to my knowledge.
What, real briefly, because there's some people tuning in that they're not as privy as us. What caused you to write that report? I call it a report.
Yeah, I mean, all of our portfolio companies told us that they were having issues with banking, and this was not an unusual thing because everyone in crypto always has issues with banking, but it got ratcheted up into the stratosphere. And then there were also a confluence of things like the joint statement, which I think was that Jan 3, 2023. And then a half dozen other kind of messages from the regulators. That made me think like something's going on here. And I had been a big like Chokepoint enthusiast. I'd actually been doing a Chokepoint series on my podcast. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening again.
Yeah. There's content when you weren't even expecting it, huh?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've always felt that crypto has been targeted unfairly, but something seemed really different in early 23. And Caitlyn, now you think it started in November 22?
It was November 22, and there was just another data point that came out today that the anonymous Twitter account bank_reg who that's a clearly somebody who's very sophisticated in banking law, who's had that account up for a long time and does an anonymous blog. A lot of speculation as to who it is. A lot of people think it's a former very senior Fed lawyer, which is why they know so much. And they posted something today lamenting that it was the SEC who revealed a material fact about Silvergate. And he was lamenting, why didn't the Fed reveal this in its own report? And it's a question that answers itself. The Fed self-reported, self-assessed its own response to the bank failures of the spring of 2023. And the Board of Governors didn't even sign off on that self-assessment, right? So imagine how objective it was. And that was, of course, what this bank reg person was alluding to. But the reason I brought that background up is they pointed out that it's now been confirmed, a new data point, that on November 23rd, 2022, that Silvergate signed a memorandum of understanding with the San Francisco Fed. And that's all right at that same time as my pinned tweet thread that reveals some evidence of right around Thanksgiving. And I was wondered in the Custodia document discovery, why there was this flurry of emails on the Sunday after Thanksgiving 2022. Why were all these government employees working on a Sunday? And a Sunday of a holiday weekend, no less. And then some insiders put the puzzle pieces together for me eventually. And that was when Operation Chokepoint 2.0 started at the Fed. And multiple insiders actually kind of gave some context for why the Fed went first, because the perception was that the Fed was the most crypto friendly. And then Custodia was getting very close. You can see it in the document discovery. And prior to that November 23rd timeframe, just 1 week prior, there was all this email evidence of the Fed talking about conditions for approving Custodia. And so they were moving forward to approval, which is what we knew privately. We had a punch list of things we had to get taken care of, and we were going to have a second exam, which is not uncommon in the banking world. I know of multiple companies that had to have 3 before they became Fed member banks. But long story short, we got the rug pulled, and things like no showstoppers and everything is addressable suddenly became these things are all fatal. That was not genuine. What they actually thought was very different than what the Fed publicly said. And it was because Operation Chokepoint 2.0 had begun, and the Fed had to go first, at what I'm told, to prove its bona fides to the other agencies. And in particular, one insider told me it was because the Fed was afraid that the SEC was going to steal jurisdiction over stablecoins, and that's why the Fed had to shoot the stallion. And Custodia was this close to getting approved. And right at that time, Michael Barr, there was evidence of a meeting with Michael Barr about Custodia. And right after that, suddenly there was no more discussion about approving Custodia with conditions, and suddenly a discussion about denying Custodia, all at the same time that we now know the Fed went after multiple banks. It was a coordinated effort. And we knew at the time, Nick, I think you and I talked about this in the spring of 2023, that I had that email from Bloomberg that confirmed that that the OCC and the Fed were coordinating and were asking all of their applicants with crypto in their business plans to voluntarily withdraw, which one did, Paxos did, Protego did not, but it didn't survive as a business. And Custodia obviously chose to fight. We refused to be intimidated. And in retrospect, it's very obvious the intimidation tactics that the Fed tried, and they didn't succeed with us.
Hey, listen, Nick, before you got on, Caitlyn and I went over how these whistleblowers have exposed a couple things. One, that people like yourself and Custodio have been targeted, that they've actually, if we hear people out there online who are still skeptics, they could be being paid because of a misinformation campaign that the FDIC folks have implemented. We've also learned that it's why subpoena power is so important, because with FOIA, they have a campaign where they put a lawyer in a meeting that's not necessary. So then maybe a FOIA request comes in, they can say invoke attorney-client privilege, or maybe they use a word phrase that will meet the exception of a FOIA requests that they get to keep. And so, anything else I've missed that you want to highlight? And then my next question to you was, do you think there will be subpoena power and a real complete full investigation?
Yeah, I mean, I've been told that both the relevant folks in the House and the Senate are launching their own investigations with subpoenas. So I think we have the right people in place to do that.
Yes.
I think it'll take a while. I don't know if the leaks will hasten things or give the folks that are investigating better directionality and a good sense of what to look for. But there will be hearings, maybe even this month, actually.
Yep.
So probably next month.
It sounds like you and I both know the same thing, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, the hearings, I think, will be more, not to say this in a pejorative sense, but I think more for show.
Yeah.
And I think the real information will come out with these congressional investigations. I mean, what I want to see is a smoking gun, like some sort of cross-agency memo, some evidence of coordination.
Yeah. And I'm a plaintiff's attorney, Nick. I've sued corporations for greed. We call it the motherfucker document that you show a jury, where the jury looks and goes, motherfucker, right? But anyways, let's pull up Mrs. Post, because Caitlyn, you may have some insight. When Nick was saying he was confident, you were shaking your head yes. And I know Senator Lummus posted a post. There it is, right there. You confident as well, Caitlyn, that we're going to get to the bottom of this?
Yeah, she's my senator, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see her wade into that. It means she's watching what's going on, and that was directly, I think it was the day after the FDIC exposed allegations came out on Twitter. They released their very detailed, very long post on Saturday, and Senator Lummus came out and said that on a Sunday. And I haven't talked to her. I have no idea how she knew, but she clearly is watching all this. And look, it's not just the crypto industry, it's fintech as well, but also it is people who were associated with the first Trump administration and religious groups. Sam Brownback, the former senator from Kansas, he coined the hashtag chased away because JP Morgan Chase was closing so many religious groups' accounts and political conservatives' accounts. And, so somebody like that, who the Senate knows him, right? Because wasn't that long ago a U.S. senator, and he's coming out talking about all of this. And then the CFO of Florida, Jimmy Patronis, is talking about the Trump family being targeted for debanking. And then a number of conservatives have said that because they were associated with the first Trump administration, they were targeted. Look, I think it was Peter Thiel. Nick, you put me onto the FT op-ed of Peter Thiel last weekend, where he said that under this current regime, the federal banking agencies tried to turn the banking system into a social credit system, where each one of us have a social credit score. And if you don't believe the right things, or you happen, to be working in the wrong industry perceived by them, whether real or not, to be a competitor or a political rival, they're going to target you. And that was quite the statement coming from Peter Thiel, because I think he's right. Nobody's ever made that connection before, that we really have a social credit system in the United States because of the way these federal bank regulators have been pulling the puppet strings, pressuring banks behind closed doors to stop serving industries. And in particular, in the FDIC's case, that violates that lawsuit settlement with the first Operation Chokepoint lawsuit.
Listen, I'm a simple guy. When billionaires are starting to debank and can't get a bank account, then something's up. The Coinbase is engaged in some FOIA litigation. Nick, can you give a summary of what that's about or uncovered?
Yeah, it's a fascinating case because it's kind of the first time we've really had any of these documents come out into the public domain. And credit to Coinbase. I think it was Austin Campbell said Coinbase is actually a beneficiary of a lot of the Chokepoint behavior. And I'm not saying that they wanted it to happen, but they are probably because, they ended up being entrenched as the de facto custodial provider. And, maybe banks wanted to do stable coins or get into custody. They weren't able to. So Coinbase, to their credit, has been waging this campaign to get documents out. And they did unearth all these pause letters from the FDIC to banks, 25 letters from between 22 and early 23. Now, I would say the pause letters are like maybe slightly distinct from what we call Chokepoint 2.0. To me, Chokepoint is like regulators going to the banks and saying, limit your exposure to the crypto industry, right? And I've been told that there were 15% thresholds message to the banks. The pause letters were slightly different. They were basically saying, if you want to do crypto products as a bank, you can't. Like, just wait for further guidance. And of course, no further guidance ever came. And then over time, the FDIC dragged their feet on revealing any details. The first crop of pause letters were heavily redacted. Then I think there was a second cycle and now a third cycle of less redacted, but still somewhat redacted letters. Now we know what it was, the kind of products that the FDIC was trying to stymie banks from launching. And it's everything. I mean, it's like a lot of it was Bitcoin buy-sell products, which I believe was NYDIG's operation that they were doing with community banks that was announced in 21 and 22 and never materialized. I think a lot of it pertained to that. You had some banks saying they wanted to service stable coins. They got a pause letter for that. You had a bank saying they actually bought an NFT. They were told to not do that. You had banks wanting to issue a debit card with Bitcoin rewards. They were told not to do that. So it's all sorts of different products. Anything pertaining to crypto, and the FDIC said, no, don't do it.
Well, and Stuart Alderotti of Ripple, who's a former bank general counsel, said, to your point, Nick, technically the letters were about the bank's own strategic activities. But he said, here, you have to understand how to read bank speak. And there were a couple of bank directors who came right out and said, when a bank board of directors gets a letter like that from the FDIC, they understand how to read through the lines. There's so much about the banking regulatory world. It's highly prescribed. There are literally the thousands of pages of regulations that banks have to deal with. And yet some of what happens is done through wink, wink, nod, nod still. And as Stuart said, when I got a bank, as bank general counsel, got a letter like that, much less going to the board like that, everyone recognizes that the real writing on the wall is run the hell away as fast as you can. And I think the way he said it was that those were designed to inflict terror on bank boards or something, strong language like that, which is exactly right. This is how it's done. As Tyler, I like to give him Tyler Winklevoss credit for talking about the mafia-like tactics. Hey, you got a nice bank there. Sure would be a shame if you got a bad rating on your Camel score, or sure would be a shame if your deposit insurance premiums went up. There are all these sort of backroom, quiet, not in writing things that happen. And again, that violates the FDIC lawsuit settlement. Everything had to be in writing if you were going to go down this path. And obviously Grunberg ignored that here. At least the allegations are.
Didn't former representative come out and corroborate that this was going on?
Yeah, I mean, he said after Signature was sent into receivership by DFS that it was because Signature had and he was, I think, on the board of Signature, that he thought it was politically motivated and that he felt they were still solvent on that Sunday evening, I believe it was, when they were sent to receivership. There's big questions about the Signature and the Silvergate decapitation. Personally, I think they were suicided, so to speak. Maybe that'll come out eventually. Maybe we'll find out. With Silvergate, I think it's unambiguous. I mean, they had a great business. They were very crypto exposed, as in they had crypto depositors as something like 95% of their depository base. They were told to pull it back down to 15% to an ancillary level. That's basically their business going away. They'd survived the bank run. They chose to liquidate voluntarily, which you never see. You never see a bank voluntarily liquidating.
Voluntarily.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, how do you go? I mean, listen, you guys know more about finance than I do, but how do you go from 95% to 15%?
You send all your depositors your money back, or you quadruple your depository base in a matter of weeks. So you're not going to be able to do that. So you just have no business. There's a case we made that was a form of eminent domain. That the government took their business away. Basically, that would be a very interesting strategy for a lawsuit, I think.
No, absolutely. Now, what do you think? We're going to see multi agency cooperation, Caitlyn? Or do you think that that's a no-brainer at this point?
Well, it's interesting because the FDIC, Grunberg stepping down, and I did post in response to the tweet that you used to publicize this podcast, some of the references to the governance fight that had happened at the FDIC in 2021, and how Marty Grunberg's been either chair or acting chair. In some cases, in one case, he overstayed the term of his board seat on the FDIC. And then questionably of questionable legality, voted to chuck out the chair of the FDIC, and so there was this coup of the FDIC, and then he became acting chair, right? And he wasn't even in a term on the FDIC board, right? So there are governance issues at the OCC as well. This is why there hasn't been an acting chair of the OCC. In fact, actually, I was reading a really interesting American Banker articles I'll post that talks about essentially there are incentives for the OCC chair not to be Senate confirmed. They get paid less, they have less power, and then they don't have as much. The Treasury Secretary doesn't have as much control over them, and so this is why you've seen so many acting chairs of the OCC. Brian Brooks was acting chair. The current acting chair is Mike Hsu, and it's governance problems, right? So there are huge governance problems really at all three federal banking agencies. So to answer your question, John, I think that because of the misdeeds here and the targeting, politicization of the banking system, which I think all of us agree is just wrong. I'm not of the view that Trump should take this and turn about his fair play and go after the left wing who went after him. No, this is not right. The banking system should be not political, but it became politicized in part because of the actions that were taken in the last few years, including this FDIC coup, so to speak. And so the point is, Trump's going to be able to get control of the FDIC. He's going to have to get a new FDIC person nominated and confirmed. So that's going to take several months, realistically, because there hasn't been anyone nominated yet. But he doesn't have an open Fed governor position coming open until January 2026. And that's depending upon whether you think Jay Powell is a Republican or not. The Fed board is either 4-3 or 5-2 Democrat. So he's got a hostile Fed. And the Fed, just as an organization, there's been a lot of studies. It's about 90% Democrats. It is not a politically balanced organization. And then on the OCC, that is the third federal banking agency that reports directly into the Treasury Secretary. Scott Bessent hasn't been confirmed yet as Treasury Secretary. We don't know who he's going to nominate for the OCC chair. That person could become acting OCC chair almost immediately. But now I've just laid out for you how sticky this is going to be, because to get all three federal agencies to work together when the Fed is going to be hostile because it's it leans very heavily towards one political party, not the one in power as of next week. And then the FDIC has had this just all-out brawl on its board very recently. How are you going to get those three agencies to work together? This is part of the challenge. I think that the punchline is, if Trump really wants to take this on, and this is really, I think, a question for Scott Bessent, do you want to take this on? And for Congress, that the potential for truly major reform of federal bank regulation is there for the first time since Dodd-Frank. And it's precipitated by the actions that these federal bank regulators took that were politically motivated, including Operation Chokepoint 2.0.
Nick, didn't the Vice Chair Travis Hill come out and say something that might be positive moving forward?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. And I believe he would become interim chair, is my understanding.
Yeah, we have your post up there that you
Day
mentioned.
one. Yeah, he had a great speech that he gave, I think, on the 10th, basically acknowledging that the FDIC had indeed engaged in this. I mean,
Yeah.
What I think will happen is actually, I think the FDIC is going to try and clean house and strike a very different direction from the Grunberg FDIC. And so I think one path to getting information in the public domain would simply be the FDIC coming out and saying, yeah, this happened. So I think that could be actually one of the first things that happens, maybe as soon as next week, is under Hill, we get some kind of disclosure of the tactics that were used.
That would be fantastic. A fantastic first step. And wasn't there was an IG investigation of Gruenberg's leadership, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, it was more than that. It was the FDIC, because of the political pressure over sexual harassment allegations that were widespread. I think there were several hundred allegations of sexual harassment and misconduct at the agency. They actually hired an independent law firm, Cleary Gottlieb, to do an independent review, and they did hundreds of interviews with FDIC staff. And it's so interesting because one would have thought that the feminists would have stood up and said,
hey, someone like the senior senator from Massachusetts,
right? Yes,
your
former opponent, right? But she defended him.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes to tell you that it's all about politics. There's so much virtue signaling that if someone really cared about the careers of the women at the FDIC, that they would have stepped forward and said, get rid of this guy. He was explosive. He was abusive, allegedly. And now these FDIC exposed whistleblowers are talking about a rape cover-up and insider trading by senior executives at the FDIC. We don't know if those allegations are true, to be fair, again, but when I saw that, it prompted me to remember that a senior manager at the Richmond Fed pled guilty. One of your former colleagues, John, at the DOJ, got a guilty plea out of the senior manager at the Fed. He traded 69 bank stocks.
Wow.
And violated all kinds of policies. So what was going on? Why was nobody watching? Why were the policies not being adhered to? And knowing how much the Fed and the FDIC work together, because remember, the Fed regulates the bank holding companies of the regulated banks. So I think, and I'm hoping that the DOJ goes and pulls on that thread. Who else was that guy talking to? Because now that we saw pretty specific allegations of insider trading of bank stocks, including shorting Silicon Valley Bank stock by the FDIC exposed folks. Again, we don't know if it's true or not, but it all coincided in time with the guy who pled guilty to doing the same thing at the Fed.
Yeah. Hey, listen, as we wrap up, Nick, what would you, other than, we know that soon to be acting chair, Travis Hill, hopefully he comes out affirmatively and releases, I don't know if he'll release documents or he'll just confirm it. What would you like to see this administration do as we move forward? What's your top couple things that need to happen?
Yeah, I mean, new appointments at FDIC and OCC without a doubt. And then there's this piece of legislation called, Caitlyn, you probably know, the Fair Access to Banking Act. Yep. There's an interesting analyst at Cato, Nick Anthony, wrote a piece recently who I really like his work. He's been very good. He's actually critical of that specific bill, even though he's sympathetic to the debanking folks like us. I'm not an expert at all or a lawyer. But from my layman's view, I think what would really solve this would be to require that the bank regulators put their guidance in writing and have that be discoverable and have that enter the public domain after some period. The informal guidance seems to be an issue. Incorporating reputational risk into the CAMELS framework also seems questionable. It's a real catch-22. In my opinion, that basically the bank regulators go to the bank and say, we think it's reputational risky if you deal with this industry. Okay, well, you made that determination. Why should reputational risk be considered alongside the rest? The C and the A and the L, et cetera. So that I think should go away. I feel that the confidential supervisory information standard has been weaponized to protect the regulators. It's meant to protect the banks, but it protects the regulators from the banks telling the public what the regulators told the banks. Right. And that is also going to be a hindrance with the hearings, right? We cannot, as far as I understand, get bank executives to go up on the stand and go under oath and say what happened. still. I don't. I think that maybe the Fed would have to waive the CSI, the prohibition on sharing CSI. Caitlyn, you correct me if I'm wrong.
This is going to be interesting because this is a gray area. Does Congress, in its oversight responsibility, have access to this? A lot of folks would argue yes. Some folks would argue no. I suspect this is going to get litigated because if Congress doesn't have oversight over these independent agencies, the Fed and FDIC, then are they above Congress? Are they above the U.S. states?
That's a great point.
Right. If they just ignore all the attempts at oversight, and this is exactly where oversight is supposed to happen, but the Fed has a history of just ignoring attempts at congressional oversight. There's also an interesting dynamic because the Senate has power over these independent agencies at confirmation time. And Michael Barr stepping down as vice chair for supervision from the Fed, he's not leaving as a Fed governor. So that's forcing Trump, unless he wants to leave that position open, to pick from one of the one of the Republicans on the Fed board. And so that's if Trump does nominate someone, then there's a Senate confirmation hearing. Same thing for the FDIC and OCC, right? And that's a time when the Senate actually does have power. I've watched and learned a lot that I didn't know, that you'd have to be pretty active in DC to really understand all the dynamics of what it means for committee chairs to be able to set the agenda and to be able to have subpoena power. There are a lot of people who are saying the Republicans were useless in the last several years because they didn't do anything. Here's the point. They didn't have the power to do anything because the way Congress works, whether you like it or not, puts extraordinary power into the leadership and the committee chairs. And if somebody's not in a leadership position or committee chair position, then they don't have any power functionally.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I don't want to forget this. What needs to happen is whatever's going to happen. We got 2 years because there's a midterm is going to come fast. And if the Democrats were to take the Senate, who becomes that person on the banking committee?
Elizabeth Warren.
We know.
I just want to shoot myself. Right?
I know, John. I'm lamenting.
I know she does. She would have the agenda. She'd be setting the agenda. She would be the one that could have subpoena power. And your point, and then Nick, I want you to chime in, but your point, Caitlyn, about this oversight issue in this gray area. I was frustrated and shocked when I was questioning why isn't the Financial Services Committee issuing subpoena to Gary Gensler? And then we saw, hey, it's never been done. We don't want to go that way. Hopefully we don't have to issue a subpoena. And I think it's because of fear that this independent agency, Gary Gensler, say, we're not going to answer it.
Yeah. Well, also one of the challenges.
What happened?
Yeah. One of the reasons why McHenry didn't use that power, whether he had it or not, is because he was trying to get a stablecoin bill done. Right. And then look what happened. The stablecoin bill didn't get done.
Yeah.
So it's too bad because I feel like an opportunity was lost. But my understanding is that the Senate subpoena power is much clearer than the House subpoena power. But here's the other piece. John, you were talking about DOJ, right? The DOJ can independently open up investigations into these things as well, because that's where you've volunteered to bring your skills. And there's another open question that may very well be litigated in all this, which is whether the agency lawyers have attorney-client privilege. There are a number of scholars who think that congressional oversight trumps attorney-client privilege at the agencies. And if that's the case, then this whole game that you were talking about, that the whistleblowers at the FDIC have alluded to about the FOIA game, it won't matter if they label something attorney-client privilege if Congress has the ability to get those documents anyway.
Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a little critical of McHenry. I don't think he did enough during his tenure. I mean, we have Fred Schill in place now in House Financial Services, which is very encouraging. He's told me he's going to get to the bottom of this. We have Tim Scott at Senate Banking. I mean, two great folks to kind of get to the bottom of the truth here. So I'm very optimistic that they'll go after this. I've been told it's a priority for the incoming Trump admin. So, yeah, I mean, Trump himself said he would do something about it.
No, absolutely. Listen, this hearings that are going to take place. Hopefully, both of you are going to be witnesses. Caitlyn, I know, is it possible with the litigation that you could still testify? I know there's certain things you obviously couldn't get into, but is that something you'd be able to do, or
TBD? Stay tuned.
Well, hopefully, Nick, you get the call. Like I said, both of you have been absolutely instrumental. Like I said at the beginning, CryptoLaw, we're going to create a site, which is going to be like a one-site depository of all the relevant information. There'll be links to the stuff that you all have posted as well. So, I was told by Ripple lawyers that they'd go to the CryptoLaw site to get the documents, that it was more efficient. So I'm going to try to create a depository for that. Nick has some interesting ideas for litigators out there, some interesting potential suits. We're going to do everything we can, because one of the things that I took it as a personal affront is, even though my name wasn't mentioned yet in these documents, when they said they're making fun of Nick and you and Custodian, saying they won't get organized enough. They'll never be able.
We're organized. Let me tell you, we're organized.
No, absolutely.
John, you are, they must not know about you, right? And how you got 75,000 people organized to agree to become defendants and have the SEC suing them. That is still just a stunning fact. Most people probably in the crypto industry don't understand what you achieved. And I'm sure the FDIC
a lot of it has to do with a lot of people thought that like I was like a Ripple fanboy or something, which has never really been the case. 80% of my net worth's in Bitcoin, as you know. So, but it's a controversial company, and I think a lot of that was missed. But listen, I do not believe it is hyperbole to call Chokepoint 2.0 and what happened. Yes, we could all move on, and there's a new administration. But like I said, midterms, 2 years, we get someone like Warren in charge of the banking committee, and we're back, potentially at square one. And so to prevent this from happening again, this is a direct attack on a free market capitalist society. If lawful businesses are denied critical financial infrastructure, you can't survive. And so I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this is a direct attack on our system and needs to be investigated, and people need to be held accountable. And so, listen, you two are the people out front. Thank you for being here. I know that you get requested all the time to come on shows like this, but I appreciate you, and we'll be in touch. I look forward to watching you both testify.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much, John.
Right.
Godspeed to both of you.
Have a good one.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you.